I am super excited to welcome Wendi Knox to our podcast today. Wendi is an author, artist, and uplifter. She used to be an award-winning creative director at one of the largest advertising agencies in LA, Los Angeles. At 50, Wendi lost her job and found herself stuck in the muck of now what? Then a life-changing experience with hundreds of red dragonflies gave flight to a new mission to inspire others in the It's Never Too Late to Soar. Wendi had her first book, From Muck to Magic, published, and her first solo art show at age 65. She had the honor of being a regular contributor to the Maria Shriver's Architects of Change blog and was featured on Rita Wilson's Voice of Strength series on the Huffington Post. Welcome to the show, Wendi.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
This is so exciting. And I wanted to mention the Maria Shriver's blog because I read her blog every week.
It's a good one. Yeah.
Now, I am super excited because you came as a recommendation to our podcast from our mutual friend, Sharon Ufberg, who was a guest on the show before. How is our friend Sharon?
Oh, she's great. She's such a force of positivity and joy,
Very cool. Now, if or when you guys watch the video of not just the audio, but the video, see that Wendi is sitting amongst a gazillion dragonflies in art. And we'll talk about this in just a little bit. But what got you into the boardroom first? So how did you get there to be a creative director, Wendi?
Well, when I was young, people always said, oh, you're so creative. You should do something with that. And, it's not easy to figure out how to actually make money being creative. So I was very blessed. I used to watch television commercials when I was a kid, and I liked the stories and the ideas. And that's what I've always been drawn to. So I was 22 years old, unhappily married for 1 year and trying to get out. And my ex-husband at the time found this article about a school called Advertising Center. And I started going at night, and little did he know that was my way out of the marriage and into this whole world of using my creativity, my love of words and images to connect with people. And I started at the very bottom, writing labels for soup cans, and worked my way up to be the only senior vice president creative director at a really big advertising agency.
Yeah, that was my next question. What does a creative director do? I had no idea. I'm like, I'm going to ask you because that used to be your job.
Yeah. Did you ever watch Mad Men?
Yeah.
Okay, so Don Draper?
Yeah.
I started like Peggy, the copywriter, and I worked my way up to be Dawn, except without the cigarettes, the martinis, and all the girls. But basically, a creative director is an idea person, and I was the writer part, and I had a male counterpart who was the art director, and we worked on the words and the visuals together and supervised the entire commercial or campaign from idea all the way to being finished. And then we supervise many, many teams of other creative people in helping them hone their ideas and get them out into the world. So
were you very
go on, sorry.
Were you very creative as a kid already?
I remember my favorite memories as a child was when everybody was asleep and I would make these worlds out of Play-Doh. I remember making like a circus and decorating my room with like cartoons and drawings. And I used to make cards for people, and I always signed it a Wendi original. Oh. And I just always was very, very creative. And it was funny, in the beginning, my career was all about writing, but I had a very good visual sense. And now at this time in my life, I'm feeling really drawn to art, in a kind of an intuitive way.
Oh, cool. Because I would think that if you're working in the boardroom, let's put it that way, which is you still worked in a very creative part of the boardroom. It's like there has to be some innate feeling of when you grow up, or that you've been fostered by your family or something like this, that made that bring out now later in life.
Well, it's funny because I, it's bizarre. I was a very creative child, and yet my parents, my mother wanted me to be a school teacher because she said it was something to fall back on, that old mentality. My father, at one point, thought I should be a court stenographer, which, oh, and
Oh,
then they wanted me to be a lawyer. All these things that really had nothing to do with my real gifts. Fortunately, my ex-husband found that article, and once I got into that class of creating ideas in advertising, it was like all the lights went off. And when I first got into that business, I love the idea of touching hearts and minds with what you create. And I did a lot of commercials for Honda and Acura. Those were my main accounts. And I did have some opportunities to do things that touched people or made them laugh or educated them. So it was very joyful. The boardroom that you talk about was not so joyful. That was, it was very difficult being the only woman at my level and the only woman that spoke up. And the men that I worked with did not like that very much. So it was very, very difficult to be such a free spirit in so many ways and have to contain so much of myself.
I think the younger generation thinks that these scenarios, just like you described it, are part of the 1950s, that we see the woman at home, martini and cooking dinner, the housewifey kind of role. But those roles still exist very much so in the upper level of management and leadership roles. As you just said, you are 50, 65 now.
Actually, tomorrow I'm 68.
I wasn't sure because I heard this on the video you sent me. It's like 68. So when you think this is not when you were 50, you were in that role, that's not that long ago.
No. And, when I watched Mad Men, and that took place in the 60s, I thought all that misogyny and all that chauvinism is alive. I mean, at least it was for me, alive and well. And I worked at an ad agency that really positioned themselves as family. And it was a very good version of an ad agency. And yet there were so many times that I was told to put a lid on it, to let the head guy at our client, I was actually told that when he got married, it was to the equivalent of a geisha girl, and that's the kind of woman he likes. And I should let my partner do the talking. So I don't know if you saw my paintings, but one of my paintings has a woman with a big red zipper on her mouth.
Yep.
I drew that in a meeting, and I was doodling and trying to get myself through this really hurtful experience, demeaning. And right after I did that little drawing, at the end of the meeting, I went into the bathroom and I had like a Holly Hunter moment, in that broadcast news. I don't know if you remember when she just lost it in the bathroom, the TV producer. It was like I had to keep so much in, and it had to come out somewhere. So it came out in my art and in tears in the bathroom. So I'm grateful for this life now that does not have that hierarchy.
And that's good, because when you were 50, you lost that job. Tell us what happened and how did it affect you and your identity?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, so I had been sensing that something was wrong, and I went in and asked my boss, because at the time, my husband was an entrepreneur, which I say is French for no health plan. And
oh my goodness.
And my parents were having all kinds of financial problems. So we really needed my big, fat executive woman job. and I felt something was wrong, and they were having budget problems and stuff at that agency, but my boss didn't tell me because he was trying to get a new piece of business. So at 50, I ended up losing that job and found myself sobbing in my backyard. For so long, I'd been building my way up this career that took a lot of energy and a lot of work. And I finally had gotten to the top rung of the ladder. And to be honest, it didn't really fit who I was inside anymore. I was doing this job because I had to. I had a child. My husband didn't have a steady income. I had my parents. So when I lost that job, I lost a lot. And like you said, also identity, because in our culture, especially I think a woman who works so hard to achieve this position, it's so much of what you do is who you are. And when I lost it, I really needed to come to terms with who I was inside and without the title. And it was scary. And also advertising, like so many businesses, is a very young business. And it's almost like you have an expiration date on your forehead. And it's not that easy to get a job like I had, and certainly not to get another one. So that was pretty devastating. But my health and my support came from a very unexpected place, which you probably read, right?
Yeah. Tell us more about that. I'm not going to interrupt you there because I know you're on a roll. Let's go.
I was in my backyard crying, like I did a lot at that time. And I said a prayer and I asked the universe, am I too old to reinvent myself? Please give me a sign. And I went for a walk with my little dog, Lucky, in my neighborhood. And I came home to my backyard and I was just shocked. The backyard was filled with hundreds of red dragonflies, hundreds of them. I didn't even have a pond or a fountain. I don't know what they were doing there, but they were whirling and swirling over our umbrella. And they stayed for 4 hours the first day and came back 3 days after that. For 4 hours each day.
Wow.
It was uncanny. And, when I saw them, it was like, I felt like a little girl seeing a merry-go-round for the first time. It was a very magical, sparkly feeling. But honestly, I was beginning to doubt my mental wellness. And because I thought, am I hallucinating? What is this? And I went and got my neighbor, who at the time was a lawyer and more sensible than me. And I said, Julie, am I imagining things or is this happening? And it was happening. And what was so amazing about it was I started Googling about dragonflies to find out why this was happening. And I discovered something I'd never heard before. And that's that dragonflies spend most of their lives, up to 4 years, crawling in the muck at the bottom of a pond. And they look like just these creepy, crawly, nondescript brown bugs. No wings, no colors, nothing. And they stay down in the muck for up to 4 years, shedding their old skin, growing new skin up to 15 times. I'm like, Dragonfly 101. And then one seemingly random day, something propels the dragonfly to crawl out of the pond up onto a rock or reed. And there in the light, in the air, her wings unfurl and she flies. She doesn't fly until later in life, the last part of her life. And that's when she has her color, and that's the beautiful dragonfly that we all see. And who would have known that she doesn't get her wings till later in life? And so I asked for a sign, and I feel like I got my life coach, the dragonfly. It was unbelievable. And everywhere I went after that, there were more dragonflies. I lived in LA at the time, Los Angeles, and there were dragonflies on the 405 freeway flying across my car, the 10, the 101, Sunset Boulevard, Hollywood Boulevard, walking to the doctor in Beverly Hills. There was a big red dragonfly. It was uncanny. And finally, my husband and I were up here in Ojai, which is this beautiful, do you know Ojai?
Yeah, I didn't say it on the introduction because I couldn't know how to pronounce it.
Oh yeah, it's a tricky one. Ojai. It's Chumash Indian. Ojai. So my husband and I came up here on a little vacation, and we were walking across the golf course at this beautiful country hotel and inn. And there was another swarm of red dragonflies. And I said to my husband, okay, that's it. Those dragonflies are after me. I think they want to recruit me they know I'm a writer and they want me to tell their story. And that's what I'm doing now, obviously. And it gave me this mission, this new perspective and mission on life to use their story to help transform my muck into magic and help others do the same. And so it was magic, that's the thing
I did
say.
not know all of this about dragonflies, Wendy, until you just told all this. Because I was like, one of the questions was, so tell us more about dragonflies, because are they always red?
No, there's so many colors. And, I honestly didn't even know they came in red. I hadn't seen that. Usually I'd seen those little skinny blue and green ones over a pond or something. And I'd certainly never seen one near the 405 freeway, and I'd never seen red. And since then, I've done so much research on them, and I've developed this hypothesis that certain color dragonflies mean certain things. So for me, the red was helping me ignite a new passion. I felt that, red is the color of the heart and passion. And I think that's what that whole experience was about, because honestly, my job looked really good on the outside and I made a lot of money and I was very grateful for that. But it did not feel like who I was. It didn't feel like it was feeding my soul anymore. And the work I'm doing now does not provide the kind of money I used to make, but I feel so rich inside because I know I'm on the path to doing what I'm meant to do. And, I feel like I've seen black dragonflies and I feel like they're about finding your power and your strength. Mm-hmm. And blue ones are about clarity and vision. I have this, I don't know if that's true, but that's how it feels to me,
Yeah. Now, initially, we were thinking about naming this episode from muck to magic. And then the more we talked about it, we did all this like texting back and forth and emailing back and forth. We decided that the title is going to be Breaking Out of the Age Cage, Changing the Stories We Tell Ourselves. And this is where I really want to hone in. We all grow up with stories that we're told about ourselves, who we are, how we should behave, how we fit into our family to begin with, and then into society. So we're putting labels on ourselves. And I was just recently talking to a friend of mine. I said, I'm the black sheep in the family. And we literally went down a rabbit hole because she's a psychologist. And she's like, oh, we have lots to explore, Heike. And so it's like the labels we're living by. And it's like, Wendi, how do we change the stories that we're telling ourselves? How did you go from executive creative director position to Wendi, the super creative person that paints, that writes, that speaks on public stages, that has transformed her life to what I will almost say what your inner you has been telling you, and you've been brave enough to embrace that new you.
Thank
So
you.
how would you go about that?
Well, one of the areas that term breaking out of the age cage came to me because I was very aware that I lost my job at 50, and 50 used to be, now 50 feels younger, but 50 seemed like you were old, you were over the hill. And if you hadn't done blah, blah, blah by 50, you weren't going to do it. So that time in my life, I remember turning 50 at the ad agency, and my partner said to me, well, you're not going to tell anybody, are you? And at the time I thought, well, why wouldn't I? And then, I was public about it, and then I lost my job. Coincidence? I don't know. But I think we have so many rules, especially as women, about age. I think that's a whopper. So you say, how do you change your story? I think the first thing is to start figuring out what you tell yourself. Like I always say, I did a painting in my book, and it's somebody's head, and it has yak, 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 yak in it. And one of the things I think is to become aware of the voices in our head and to figure out, where did they come from? So like, who told me that 50 was old? Well, for one thing, my mom was a really creative person, but she never had any confidence in herself, had very few role models, as many women, and had a lot of depression. And so I watched somebody kind of wither on the vine, all this beautiful creativity. And she seemed very old before her time. She got really, really obese, really depressed. And oddly enough, at 80, in a senior home, in a nursing home, she started painting and had her first art show. But my example of, when you get older, you're immobile, you're heavy, you're not productive, those were the things I've had to work through. And I've had to find role models of women. I love reading stories of women who start something later in life, follow their passion, or that whole image we have, like a lot of women feel invisible as they age. Where does that come from? Is it because we don't see ourselves and our value? That's what I think. I feel the outside world reflects our inside world. So if we don't recognize our own worth and the value of our experience, our voice, and the gifts we bring to the world, then nobody else will, and we will feel invisible. So I feel that really listening to the stories we tell ourselves and that society tells us is the first step to be aware. And then the second step is kind of like what Byron Katie talks about. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? So to be very aware of the self-talk we say to ourselves. So like when I look in the mirror and I see the lines under my eyes, I'm going, okay, so why are you zeroing in on the lines under your eyes instead of the light in them? Why are we evaluating people or comparing ourselves to people based on how many wrinkles we have instead of the beauty of our spirit? I mean, this is all conditioning, and it takes a lot of work to break through the conditioning. But the more we talk about it, the more we can support each other in that. And that's what I'm really interested in.
Mm-hmm. When you say the muck of the dragonflies, and you also talk about the muck of self-doubt and fear.
Yes.
How do you get from that place to self-love and acceptance?
Well, oddly enough, I feel that by allowing ourselves to, so the dragonfly spends 4 years in the muck. So many of us have spent a lot of years in the muck. And, I believe the way life works is muck to magic, it's continuous. It's not either or, it's muck and magic. So, but I feel like first we have to allow ourselves to sink into the muck. So we have to allow ourselves to deal. Okay, I have a lot of fear about this. Something that's going on with my son, for instance, is causing me anxiety and worry. And instead of just flicking the switch off, which is how our culture teaches us, people, even dear friends, they want to give you advice, give you solutions. They want to snap you out of it. And we want to snap ourselves out of it. But what I've learned is the only way to get out of the muck is to allow ourselves to go into it. And when we do, it's like, spiritual principles, to surrender and allow those feelings to come out and to crawl around in them, that's when we find the gifts. And I believe it's the surrender and the acknowledgement and the feeling it is how we move through it. And it sounds easy, but it's really difficult.
You know, when you say that, it's like my family on my mother's side tends to never have problems. Every time you ask them, they're fine. Everything's great. But you know, it's not, and they're not willing to actually look at the muck. They pretend there is never muck. And so I'm like, that's what attracted me to you too. When I read your book and your social media accounts, it's like, deal with the muck. You know, it is okay to be there. It is okay. It serves a purpose. And the more you muck around there, the more you learn about yourself.
Absolutely. And I feel now I'm feeling called. I mean, I created a class and I've done a live speaking and sharing about allowing ourselves to be in the muck, and then allowing ourselves to use what we learn there to rise up into our magic. And now I'm sort of looking at this whole age thing through those eyes, because it's sort of the same thing. It's the muck of what society has told us about age. It's the muck of what we've seen in our families and in the media and all the anti-aging and the Botox and the blah, 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 making us feel like however we are isn't okay, you know. And I feel like sort of looking at the cultural stories that we all have bought into, there's a lot of muck in there. And then working through that to rise above it. You know, I call it breaking out of the age cage. And I'm realizing that what I want to do is to own my age, which is why it was really scary. I did that video you saw about when I turned 67 with this great group called Girls Gone 50. They have this whole campaign in which women are owning their ages. And you know, it's scary. I mean, I remember growing up with this beautiful Russian grandmother who people would say, how old are you? She goes, darling, how old do you think I am? And she would never tell her age. And that was the message, you know, like we should be ashamed of it or something. So I'm trying to personally break out of that, but also not to be defined by age, and to give myself permission to try new things and to challenge myself in different ways. That I have to fight those voices inside. One of the voices I call Edna, my inner critic, and she is a bitch, and she is so mean, and she'll say things like, who do you think you are? You're too old to do that, or your art isn't good enough to, you know, just all those voices we deal with. And I think age, we all have a lot of transformation to do in that area.
And it's, you know, also social media doesn't help us. You know, I'm 60, I'm going to be 61 this year. And when I supposedly look at some other women that are my age, I'm like, well, I look like this when I was in my 30s, but I also now in my 60s, I'm smarter. I don't want to live this lifestyle that enables me to be just looking that way. Am I weaker? Am I less worthy? No, but I'm sometimes, I have to be honest, I'm intimidated. I'm thinking I should do better. I could do better. Or, you know, these things, how they affect our lives. And you talk about this in your book too, the should haves, the could haves, and how did I get here? And why am I here? Am I deserving of this? It is a struggle when you look at that. And then there's a small group of us that is saying enough of that. We're real. We have wrinkles. They're great. We have saggy skin. It's normal. Belly is no longer flat. That's normal. We're smarter. We are learning more. And I think what I love what you do is that we can be brave enough to just do and not think about, what is Susie going to think about this? Or, oh my God, when the neighbors find out I did this sculpture, what are they going to think?
Well, you know, actually on my bulletin board right now, I have a thing up and it says you can do brave things, because I've decided to name my 68th year my year of audacity. And there's the voices in my head that tell me, oh, you should lay back. I mean, I'm around people sometimes who say things like, well, at our ages, we should and you know, I was thinking about this when we moved to Ojai. People said, oh, are you retiring? And I just, in the bathtub last night, I thought of my answer. No, I'm refiring. I feel like I'm going toward things that ignite me, that light me up, even though they make me nervous, you know, and like saying my age. Or one of the things I'm gonna do, I signed up for a class to do a TEDx talk.
Yes.
And you know, there's so many of them and you think, what do I have to say and who am I? But I know I have a message. I feel that this dragonfly message is a really important one, because you know, as women, we're often put into these categories, or at people, you know, so it's like you're middle age, you're old age. Well, what if you don't fit into those categories? What if we are the age of the dragonfly age, and that what we're doing is rising up into our true selves? What if instead of becoming less of who we are, we're becoming more of who we are? Maybe our faces, our flesh isn't as great as it was, but our spirits are more expansive. And I feel like we have more gifts to share with the world. So that's the year of audacity, because
I love it.
It's going against the grain and going against sort of my inner safety net. But I just kind of feel like, if not now, when? If there's anything this year taught us, is there's nothing for sure, and we might as well listen to our hearts and feed our souls, because I think that is where we get our best guidance. It's not out there, it's in here. So.
Now, Wendi, how do we allow ourselves to let go of these feelings?
Well, if you ask my husband, he'd say you need to have lots of Kleenex on hand. So I think it's not, one of the things I find is, if you treat yourself the way you would treat your best friend, which is, at least this is how I treat my friends, is allow them to feel what they're feeling. Ask if they need anything, be comforting and supportive, but not try to fix it. And I think that's what we need to do for ourselves. I mean, we had something happen in our family this last week that was very challenging. And I'm not usually like this, but you know who the goddess Kali is?
No.
Kali's the Indian goddess, and she's all fire and daggers. And anyway, she heals through rage. So I found myself enraged, and I let myself yell. I went in my car, and you know, yoga, lion's breath. I mean, if somebody had seen me, I was just like roaring in my car, and then I was crying, and then I laid down on the grass and, you know, spoke to the earth to release these feelings. And I think there's a lot of different ways to do it. It's not always pretty, but it feels really good afterwards. And I think we need to give ourselves permission to get it out, you know, however we need to, as long as it's not harm to anybody else, you know.
Yeah, I think many of us are ashamed of those feelings and showing them publicly, whether, you know, if you're sitting in your car and nobody's there, it's nobody there but you and you, or the woods or wherever, it doesn't matter where it is. But I think, I mean, at least I think that, oh my God, if somebody sees me, what will they think? And I know many women feel that way.
Well,
and
I'm not advocating going on the airwaves with this. You know, my husband saw me, and he's a safe place, thank God. But yeah, no, I understand. And I think there's a balance. Like, you know, in my blog, I reveal a lot, but I don't tell everything. Nobody needs to hear it all. It's like, I always ask myself, what do I communicate that can be of service to others? You know, I don't feel like we should be airing all our dirty laundry or, you know, every feeling that we have. But I think if speaking your truth about being nervous about aging or dealing with challenging things can help others, then I feel telling enough stories so that it's truthful, you know.
Yeah, yeah. So how do you set yourself free from those old beliefs and move on?
Well, therapy has helped.
Go to Wendi, get a dragonfly or two or three, or get her book and just look at what the story tells in her book about the shoulds and the coulds, haves, and the zipper and all of that.
Well, you know, you're talking about my book, and it's called From Muck to Magic, an Uplifting Journey. And that book, I'm really big on setting intentions and asking. So I asked the universe, how do I share my story of what happened with the dragonflies to uplift and inspire others? And it was interesting because I was going through a very dark period in my life and I wasn't feeling very creative. But then one day, I call it feeling your flutter. It's like the dragonfly. We don't know what propels it to finally climb out of the pond, but I feel like some imperceptible urge, some flutter, maybe they don't have a heart, I don't know, but something inside of them makes them want to crawl. I feel like something inside of me got me to go sit at my computer, and I received a message. I received the poem in my book. It came to me in one fell swoop. It was almost as if the dragonflies whispered it in my ear. I don't know if you know about channeling, but I feel like it was a channeled message from the divine or the dragonflies. And it was, you know, my poem starts, have you ever been stuck in the muck with the yuck and the guck that you thought, what the muck? And it takes you through the dragonfly's journey, and then it's about acceptance and giving yourself self-love. So I always say it's the journey from self-doubt to self-love. And the dragonflies, when they're at the bottom of the pond, they eat everything in sight. They're like eating machines. They eat like 10 times their body weight. So I always say, when we're in the muck, we need to feed ourselves. Not necessarily Haagen-Dazs, but more feeding our souls. So what makes you feel good? How do you take care of yourself? Is it being alone? Is it being with a friend? Is it taking a walk in nature? Is it breathing, meditating, painting, dancing? You know, but really one thing I do is I lay on the grass. I put my hand on my heart and I breathe and I ask, what would make you feel good right now? And listen to what comes up, because I feel like the answers are right here. But many of us don't make the time or the space or know that we can ask. And I've done a lot of asking in my life, and that's where the magic and the miracles have come. And it's how my book came. After I got the words, I started praying to receive the paintings, and I would set an intention. How do I paint self-doubt? How do I paint worry? How do I paint joy? And one by one, the paintings just kind of came out. I didn't plan them. It just came from somewhere deep inside, I believe.
Yeah, I think a lot of women are afraid to experience that feeling, because God forbid, if I allow myself to feel that way, what is going to happen? It's going to change my life potentially completely. But isn't that what old age or aging or whatever you want to call it is all about? To break out of the mold, to get into embracing the things that we were afraid to look at earlier in life.
To look at or to be, you know, I remember as a little girl, one of my favorite things was to paint. And I used to do I remember being in an art class painting watercolor and ink, and it was very messy. and my teacher loved it. And I remember coming home and showing my mother, and my mother was a perfectionist, and she kind of turned her nose up at it. And so for a very long time, I didn't paint. And then when I was in my big job and feeling like so shut down, and I had a child at home and no time to myself, something told me to take this class called Art and Spirit, and we would meditate and paint. It was like an intuitive form of painting. And oh my God, my whole world opened up. And now I'm feeling called more and more. Like, one of the things I'm doing in my age of audacity is I'm turning our garage into what I call a heart studio. And to do more painting. And like, my husband is so used to me being so goal oriented. He said, well, what is your objective in doing this? I said, to play, to be joyful, to explore, and kind of to have the happy childhood I didn't always feel like I had, you know, and to give myself the space to expand and to play. And it's audacious because our minds tell us one thing, but our hearts and our spirits. And I feel like as we age, some of the clues to where our spark is or where our magic is lies in what we loved doing as a child, you know. And so having the time and space and giving yourself permission, like, hopefully as we age, we've already you know, cross some things off of our to-do list of life, and we make more space. I like to call it my to-be list, you know, where you get to be who you really are and give yourself more space to show your true colors. You know?
Yeah. What will be your final words to our listeners around breaking out of the age cage?
Well, the interesting thing is, when I did this little video about turning 68, and I said that it sounds so old, but every day I'm feeling younger and younger. I don't necessarily feel that way when I look in the mirror, I'll be honest, but in terms of how I feel inside, and I think that's because I have really been listening to my heart and feeding my soul. And I believe that, I'll call it the fountain of truth. I feel like we're looking out there for the fountain of youth, products and everything. I feel like it's right in our hearts. And the more we listen to our hearts, the more joy, the more self-expression, and the more positive juju we have in our lives. And I was reading an article recently where they said that people that had a passion and a purpose live 8 to 10 years longer. And I believe that's true. So that was why I was drawn to your Pursue Your Spark, because it's very much what I feel keeps us younger. And I'm going to be writing a lot more about this. This is part of my age of audacity, is really addressing these things. And on my blog at wendyknox.com, excuse me for being the goddess of shameless self-promotion, but that's where you can find my book and materials about this aging out of the age cage. You know? Now,
with that said, where can people find you on social media and get your book, Wendi, you shameless self-promoter, you?
So my website is called wendyknox.com, and I had to be different growing up. So even though I was named Wendi with a Y, I changed it to an I. So it's WENDI Knox.com. So on there, you'll find my book. There's a link, and you can get 20% off with the code MAGIC. And also on my website is my blog, where I'm going to be really exploring this idea of the age of audacity and breaking out of the age cage. So,
and we can find you on Facebook under
Facebook under, I have Wendi Knox, WENDI, Knox, KNOX, author. On Facebook, I have an author page, and I also have a Wendi Knox normal page,
Mhm.
and an Instagram, Wendi Knox uplifter, and couldn't think of a title for myself. So I love lifting people up.
It
So
was a perfect title for you, Wendi.
thank you. Thank
So
you.
we're putting all the links in the show notes for you.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
As I always say, do not pull off the road. Do not start writing while you drive or while you're out there exercising. We have you covered once the episode airs. You will have the links to get in touch with Wendi right there in the show notes. And I want to say thank you to Wendi for getting us from muck to magic and enlightening our lives with more magic as we're aging and beyond aging. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you. You have such an open way. I think I talk too much. Maybe you were so inviting, you know.
And I also want to ask our listeners, as I always do at the end of the episode, is when you're listening to the episode or you watch the video on YouTube or on Facebook, where I always post all of my content, in Instagram, of course, let us know, reach out to Wendi and myself, and let us know how this episode affected you, how it helped you move forward. If you have questions, if you're not sure about something and you want to know, please reach out to us, because that means a lot to us. And we as women are in it together. And especially now we're all over 50. Wendi's going to be 68 tomorrow.
Yes.
I'm going to be 61 this year. So we are over 50, but no matter how old you are, if you're 40, you're more than welcome here. If you're 90, you're more than welcome, because as we're creating magic and we're igniting our sparks, what better way to live is there? So with that, my friends, we're out of here. Wendi and I have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you next time on the Pursue Your Spark podcast. Ciao. Oh, wait. I gotta stop. Where is it? Hold on. Where is my, oh, here. No, keep hang in there. Oh, here it is.